Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bengals Insiders channel. I'm Sam Black. I'm your host. I'm joined by Braeden Guthrie
Hi, how y'all doing?
and Micah Haring.
Hey.
The three of us will be running through a hypothetical situation where the Bengals have $55 million in cap space this offseason. We have all listed a slate of moves that will be worth approximately that $55 million. Braeden, take it away.
All right. So to start off this situation, I started off by tagging Carl Lawson. It's going to be a complicated offseason to try and negotiate his contract. The Bengals' defensive line was banged up with injuries. Carl Lawson was the only consistent guy on the line. He only recorded 5.5 sacks throughout the season, but a lot of his pass rush production came from forcing the quarterback to step into other sacks, into players such as Mike Daniels, Sam Hubbard, or who else is on the defensive line. So the analytics are definitely in favor of Carl Lawson, but the Bengals are still probably not going to want to give him a massive $20 million a year contract for 5 years at this point. They probably want to wait, give it another year. So the tag for Carl Lawson and defensive ends was around 17 million last year, and without it being updated with our knowledge, we're saying it's remaining around 17 million. So that's how I'm starting it. Then my next contract I'm giving is a corner, but not the one you guys are probably thinking. I'm re-signing Mackenzie Alexander to a 2-year, $13 million contract. Last offseason, the Bengals signed Mackenzie Alexander to a 1-year deal worth $4 million. Alexander didn't have a great year, definitely didn't have a bad year. He didn't have a crazy great season where his market value skyrocketed up. I think he played well enough for the Bengals so where they're going to want to keep him for a few years. And when you consider value and production, I think $6.5 million is fair for both sides. Then I am not re-signing William Jackson. I think it's going to be a very complicated situation because there have been times where William Jackson has looked like a lockdown top 5 corner in the NFL, and there are other games where he just wonder why he's starting. So I think William Jackson's going to, and his agent are going to come and look what I can do at my highs, and the Bengals will be like, yeah, wait a second. There's just no consistency there. And we don't want to make assumptions about how players feel, but when history suggests when players have showed high-end talent, they ask for high-end money. So I think there just may be a misconnection there, and William Jackson will feel that testing the market will be the best for him and will probably find more money than the Bengals are going to offer. But I do have a big signing coming up, Joe Thuney, who I think every Bengal fan is talking about. I think he's honestly a realistic free agency target for the Bengals. We saw last year they're willing to spend in positions that they needed, and this year the Bengals showed they need offensive line. They also know it. They kept switching out starters as the season went on. And with the Hopkins injury to add on to that and Quentin Spain being a free agent, they know they need to spend in free agency. And I didn't even mention the Burrow injury. They want to protect Joe Burrow, and they know just by switching out the starters that they don't have anybody there. So I've them signed Joe Thuney to a 4-year contract worth $65 million. So that's about $16.25 a year. And that would make him, I think, the highest paid offensive lineman or offensive guard in the NFL, and that's what it's going to take. I think regardless where Thuney signs, he's going to end up being the highest paid interior offensive lineman in the NFL. Thuney grew up in the Dayton area, so many would consider his hometown. The Bengals definitely have a bright future, so the Bengals could definitely pitch that to him. If the Bengals are willing to offer the money, I don't see why there isn't a great shot with Bengals and Thuney. Then my next guy who had the Bengals signing is another offensive lineman, and one we're familiar with, Quentin Spain, to 1 year, $6.5 million contract. Spain, he was a mid-year signing for the Bengals and about as good as an offensive lineman you can sign in the middle of the season. He played at an average level. He was reliable, and I think the Bengals are going to be looking to maintain him as their offensive line has way too many pieces to fix in one offseason, as something we've said too many times in the past, but you're not going to find long-term replacements for all the spots you need to this offseason. So I think they're going to be aware of that. They know Spain's a reliable guy. He's not going to be asking for too much money. And he was making about $5.5 million last year. And so I think a $6.5 million contract is fair on both sides. Then my next three signings are pretty boring. I have them re-signing Kevin Huber, the punter since 2009, to a 1 year, $2.5 million contract. That's about the same as he was making before, a tad less. His not quite as he was good as he was a few years ago, but he's still been a reliable punter. And I think both the Bengals and Huber are looking to get a deal done. Then everybody's favorite cornerback, LaShawn Sims, I have the Bengals re-signing him to a 1 year, $1 million contract. I think there's a clear chemistry with Lou Anarumo and LaShawn Sims, and also Sims that played a lot of special team snaps. So I think the Bengals are going to be looking to retain him for at least another year. And my final one is Ceylon Carter, the special teams guy and sometimes H-back/fullback, to 1 year, $850,000 contract, a pretty low-end contract, as obviously Carter isn't going to draw much interest. He knows the Bengals scheme. He's a reliable special teams player, so I think the Bengals are going to be looking to keep him. So that wasn't quite $55 million. That's closer to $45 million, as history does suggest the Bengals don't like, even last year, the Bengals don't want to spend all the cap they have in one season. They like to keep some around, and just in case there's a free agency signing they need to make during training camp, like last year with Mike Daniels. So I don't think they would spend all $55 million. I think they would like to keep $10 to $15 million around to either carry over or have emergency cap for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that was a very interesting slate of moves. I think I liked a lot of those picks. I think the biggest controversy here was not signing William Jackson. I think you made some very valid points about what that negotiation process is going to look like. I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. I think his leverage is a little bit limited, given that he's not as much of a household name. I don't think he attracts as much value as you think he does. But I definitely think that Mackenzie Alexander's a valid signing there. And I think down the line, the rest of those moves were absolutely really solid. Thuney's going to be a consensus free agent target, just because of his home, the fact that he's from Ohio, and obviously he's the biggest name and our biggest need. So solid picks. All right, Micah, it's your turn now.
All right. So as far as, I guess, the guys I would re-sign, the biggest one is I would still tag Lawson. I don't think he's worth, a full franchise tag, but let's face it, if the Bengals don't re-sign him and don't sign any other linemen, you're looking at an injured Geno Atkins who's already on the wrong side of 30. You're looking at, Sam Hubbard, and then that's about it to generate sacks on a line that was not very good last year. Unlike Braeden, I would re-sign Jackson, $15 million per. I would, I'm looking at the lockdown corner potential that he has, and hoping that a little more consistency can get him there, and hoping that, between the pandemic and the fact that he's not a household name, he can, sort of, I guess, meet me in the middle right there. I would also re-sign Huber as well for $2 million. He's a hometown guy, and, he hasn't been too much of a punching bag, so I definitely think we should keep him. And then as far as guys that I think we should sign from other teams, the biggest one is, I think, Taylor Moton at $15 million per. He's a great tackle for the Panthers. We need to lock down, the right side of our line. I love Thuney, but honestly, a tackle would be better than a guard. And, I just can't stand another season of, a guy who's at Bobby Hart's level or worse playing there. And I don't want to lock us into, reaching for Slater if Sewell's not there. And then as far as on the defensive line, I'm thinking we snag from the Seahawks Ziggy Ansah for, about $1 million. He's been a boom or bust player for most of his entire NFL career. He's had seasons of 14 and a half and 12 sacks with the Detroit Lions, but he's also had really low production. I figure we sign him for cheap and then hope, he busts off. But, if he doesn't, then he would be a decent depth piece. I also have a signing PJ Hall for $1 million. He's a former second rounder from the Raiders that they cut right after the Texans signed him. He's had, a couple sacks, and decent amount of tackles, not a bad depth signing, but, we could always look for more. That takes me to just about 49 million. Keeping about 6 million for the Bengals to play around with before, we make any other cuts.
Those are good picks. I definitely like Ziggy Ansah. He's, for a very, very low price point, certainly a player that can generate not only success on the field, but also a lot of hype. Certainly a player that brings the energy. Could also be bringing the dollars, especially in the first season, potentially back with a full house of fans. I also think that those are solid picks as well. So for my list, mine was a little bit shorter. So the top of the list for me was signing Joe Thuney to kind of what Braeden said in the 4 year 60 to 65 million range. I had it 4 years 60. That's what his market value is. Kind of at with a lot of sites. So that's about 15 per. I think, Thuney is a really, really solid pick because of, he has some sort of perceived interest being from Ohio. There's reason to suspect that Cincinnati could potentially be a top destination, even though it's not generally a top destination for free agents. He's going to have an opportunity to make an impact right away. And so I think Thuney's not only realistic, but a very, very good target for the Bengals to fill a major need. My second is regarding William Jackson. And I think I agree with Braeden. I think he's going to try to drive a hard bargain during the free agency process. I think he will probably be looking in like the 16 to 18 million dollar range. But I also think that given the circumstances, that's probably not realistic. We just came out of a pandemic. Teams aren't doing as well financially. The league is not doing as well financially. I think $18 million is a pretty unrealistic deal, and I think he's going to learn very quickly that he's not going to be getting that. So I think the hope is that William Jackson will be reasonable. That's not a guarantee, but I have William Jackson being signed to a sort of prove it 2 year, $30 million deal where he can kind of try to prove, and really $30 million maximum over 2 years. Give him 2 years to prove that he's worth $18 to $20 million a year. And if he can't prove it, then we simply move on. Because although he has, like Braeden said, a lot of potential to be a top 5 corner, he also brings a lot of inconsistency and potentially negative energy. So the third move I have is also franchise tagging Carl Lawson. I think that's a consensus move with the three of us. He has not demonstrated that he's worth, in the 17 to $20 million range on a long-term deal. But again, it's a kind of an opportunity for Carl Lawson to really prove himself for one more season, and potentially after getting some more talent in the draft or elsewhere, there could be potential for him to really break out this season. And the fourth and final move that I have is another offensive lineman signing Corey Linsley to a one year $8 million deal. That is, given the current circumstances, I think $8 million is a pretty reasonable amount. Some have him valued a little bit higher, closer to 9. I have him at 8. I think Linsley, again, is just filling another major need. We never know what's going to happen with Hopkins. Billy Price is not panned out. I think at center is a position where we could fill a major hole and do it well. There's a lot of tackle talent in this year's draft. I think there are a lot of guys who can be plug and play. And so I think Linsley fills a major need, and he gives the Bengals some more punch on the offensive line. Those are my 4 picks. That brings me to about right at 55 million. Those are 4 larger picks. And then the rest of the talent I'm looking for is in later rounds of the draft to fill some of the more niche needs that the team has going forward. So that's it for us. Thank you for watching. This is the Bengals Insiders channel, and we hope you watch again.